And joining us now, William McCormack, Toronto's police chief from 1989 to 1995.
Correct.
Chief, it's good to see you again. Nice to have you in the studio.
My pleasure to be here.
I got to take care of a little business just before we talk, and that
Please
is
do.
I want to remind everybody who's watching that we call this a Your Agenda broadcast because you are involved. Fifth column blogger Mike Miner is hosting a live chat on our Inside Agenda blog. That's on our homepage, tvo.org/theagenda. You can also access it on our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/theagenda. Or you can send us a tweet at twitter.com, #YourAgenda. Just jump on in and we'll get your comments on the screen throughout the broadcast. Okay, you know, I wish we had a better occasion upon which to have you here, but that is the nature of your business and ours, that we are here to talk about a man who died in the line of duty. Ryan Russell was killed yesterday, 5 minutes from this studio. What is the chief's top priority when he learns that one of his officers has been killed?
Well, the top priority, as you can appreciate, is immediately to go to the scene, to do as much as he can or she can in terms of assisting the family, you know, the notification of the family. All of those things have to be taken into consideration. And, of course, looking at it from the point of view of the loss of somebody who is a police officer, and a police officer of some great note, and under tragic circumstances and so on. All of that, and of course you have the media on the other side to be contended with. I've done it on a few occasions, and I can tell you it's hectic, to be quite honest.
You had three, right? Three died
yeah.
while you were the chief?
No, two while I was the chief.
Two officers died while you were the chief?
That's correct.
And you make the call? You call
yes,
the family?
Indeed, yeah. Well, yes, call the family. Usually the family are at the hospital and before you get there, sort of things, you know, so it's usually a personal contact. But not only that, but if I may, I'll tell you that my years in the homicide squad also prepared me for that kind of thing, because we did that on a continuous basis, as you can appreciate. But there is nothing more difficult, shall we say, to a chief or to the force in general than the death of one of its members, especially in the case, as it were, yesterday, from the point of view of what a terrible waste to a fine young man.
What do the rank and file, or the troops, I guess, as some chiefs have called them, what do they expect from you at that kind of a moment?
They expect you to be what you are there for, and that is a leader. And that is a sympathetic person who has the understanding and who has the love of the people whom you have working for you.
It's almost 9 years since the last officer was killed on the line of duty.
That's
on
correct,
the Toronto
yes.
force.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, I guess, thankfully, this does not happen a lot. I guess we can put it that way.
Yes.
In which case, are the officers themselves really prepared when something like this happens?
Well, that's a difficult question to answer, because when you look at it from the point of view of preparation, you're never really prepared for it, never. And when you look at it from that point, it's the old story. It can't happen to me, sort of thing. You have to maintain that, although in the back of your mind at all times, the risk is there. The risk is there facing you continuously as a police officer. So what you do, in effect, is you do the best you can to handle it whenever it does occur, and realize that it could be you. It could be any one of you. And that's one of the things that comes right through.
Obviously, everybody on the Toronto Police Service is talking about this today. Everybody, all the time, in their squad cars, in their stations, walking the beat, wherever, on horseback. Mm-hmm. Does it become debilitating to their ability to do their jobs properly, given how, A, grief-stricken, B, distracted this must be for them?
Well, yes, I agree with you to a certain degree, but then there's another function that police officers are very adept at making decisions that they have to make when they are on duty and when they have been charged with the safety of the public, no matter what they're doing. So therefore, that's a priority that's there continuously. They may be talking about it, they may be showing quite some grief for the whole thing, which I'm sure they do. And have all of the sympathy in the world for the family and so on. But then, by the same tokens, the work goes on, the cause endures.
That's very Kennedy-esque.
That's quite so.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Okay, let's talk this is what you call in television a bit of a hard turn, but we're going to go from that to the meeting that has been taking place, that took place, I gather, a 90-minute meeting between the current Mayor of Toronto and the current Chief of Police of the Toronto Service. And this is all about money. And I'm going to start by putting up a graphic here to give those who live across Ontario and beyond a sense of what we're talking about here. The Toronto Police Service is, of course, the biggest service in the country. It's 5,000 plus uniformed officers. There are also, in addition to that, more than 2,000 civilian employees. How's this for a budget? $888 plus million last year, and the ask for next year is over $900 million. And that's actually $17 million less than was originally requested. So there was this meeting that took place, and another one of the reasons that we wanted you in here tonight was because you've been in the room. You know how these things go. When the chief goes to the mayor and says, I gotta have this, I gotta have this, I gotta have this, or else. What's that conversation like?
Well, he has to prove to the mayor that he has to have this, that, and the other. That's number one. The other thing that you have to take into consideration is to be very, very down to earth about the whole thing. What price do you pay for the safety, and not only the safety of the people, but the safety of the police officers themselves, as exemplified yesterday? Let me assure you that there's no question that everything in life has, as far as finance is concerned, has risen quite substantially. Policing is no different. So you look at it from that point of view and you say to yourself, I'm going to fight for those people whom I know deserve to have a better budget and better equipment. All of those things fall into it. It's a huge amount of thought.
How do you fight that good fight?
You fight that good fight by having to be very, very careful in handling the politicians.
Well, that's it. I mean, can the police chief campaign, if you like, for his budget in public?
Well, not directly, but indirectly, I'm sure that you can look at it from that point of view. But a police chief has to be extremely candid with the public at all times. So, and make sure that the public realize that if you cut me short in this area, shall we say, just give you an example of that, then I will not be able to protect you in that area. And that's contingent on the budget being there for me to be able to help you.
I have no doubt but that the chief makes that case. Does the mayor then come back and say, give me a break, chief. You're telling me you can't keep everybody alive if I don't give you 10% more? Is that how it works?
Well, not really. No, not really. There's more understanding than that, and I would hope that there would be, and I would hope that the mayor would have the cognizance of a greater understanding of the faculty of policing that is so necessary in this day and age, when crime, albeit that you have had a 30% drop in crime in metropolitan Toronto, don't let it fool you for an instant. Not only that, but it's a day that you're looking at drugs. Look at the homicides, for instance, and look at the solving of the homicides, for instance, which is another concern. All of those concerns put together, they need their budget.
But I wonder how the relationship goes between the mayor and the police chief. Is it something like this, where the chief says, I need this? Does the mayor then say, okay, I'll do my best to help you get it? Or does the mayor then say, come on, cut this, give me a break? How does that go?
Well, in my experience, I've found that with dealing with the mayor and the politicians and so on, some would be very, very good in that respect, and others obviously would not. And it's something that unfortunately makes news, and it also puts their names to the fore in terms of saying, no, we have said no, and we mean no, and so on and so forth, etc. Well, that's not fair. You have to look at it from the point of view of saying, they're there just as we are to protect the people whom they are in charge of, from the point of view of being politicians, as mayor, as members of council, and members of the police services board, and all of those things.
But are you ever so blunt as to say, call a press conference and say, if Toronto City Council cuts this program, more people are going to die? Does it get
Not
that blunt?
really, not in that context, but there are other ways.
Well, okay, well, like what? Tell us some of the tricks of the trade here.
I don't profess to have all the answers to that question, but I do say to you that in most cases, as far as I was concerned, and I'm quite sure the present chief is concerned, there will be facts brought out for the public knowledge.
What does that mean?
Well, then the public turns around and says, what do we do here? Do we accept what the mayor is saying, or do we accept what the chief is saying?
So it is a bit of a game of public relations and trying to get...
No question, life is.
Life is, okay. Well, you no doubt saw this piece in the Toronto Star the other day by the former mayor, John Sewell.
You and I had a great meeting with him at one point.
We did, didn't
room.
we? In this studio. Yeah, we did a program.
I was quite surprised.
All of us
He was
together.
very congenial.
You guys got on actually way better than I thought you would.
Exactly. Yes, I was afraid of that.
Well, tell me what you thought of what he had to say the other day. I'm going to read a little excerpt of it here.
You don't need to. It's ghastly.
Well, okay. Just for those who didn't get a chance to see it, I'll read a couple of paragraphs. Chief Bill Blair, the former mayor, wrote, noted in this budget request that in 2010, the police responded to 578,000 calls for service to the end of November, about 630,000 for the full year. There are 5,600 officers, which means that on an average, each officer responded to about 110 calls in 2010. Since each officer works about 220 shifts per year, this means that each officer responded to one call for service every 2 shifts. In the United Kingdom, the government has decided a cut in the police budget of 19% is in order. Margaret Thatcher cut police services in the UK by an even larger amount, and so did New York City in the 1980s. Disaster did not occur. Instead, police services had to look closely at what they really needed to spend money on. Okay, that's John Sewell's math. Is the Toronto Police Service budget too big?
No.
Has he not made the case?
No.
Why not?
Because for the simple reason he's playing with statistics to the point where they're totally outlandish. When you look at it from the point of view, he's not taking into consideration the variety of shifts that the police officers work, 24 hours a day, together with the fact that, you know, his whole article incensed me, to say the least. Because for the simple reason there's absolutely no, well, very little fact to it.
Well, what's he got wrong?
Well, everything, everything. Because you know you can. Let's assume that you're in charge of a shift in a police station and you have 8 persons going out in 4 cars or what have you. That's for one shift, which is so many hours, 10 hours or 12 hours, and then the next one for the next shift and so on. But it's not 8 persons you have out there anymore. It's 16, it's 22, and so on. His statistics are totally off beam.
Well, the biggest item, of course, in any police budget is salaries.
Absolutely.
Okay. Is it possible to cut the police budget without cutting the number of cops?
I don't see where you're coming from there, to be quite honest with you. When you say cutting the police budget, but if you cut the police budget, you're cutting salaries.
For sure.
Absolutely.
So there's no gravy train down there?
Well, there is. There is. There certainly is. When you say a gravy train.
I'm just quoting the mayor.
Yeah. When you're saying gravy train, I think that everyone who works for a living looks at it from the point of view of gravy train, but it's not gravy train. It's pure fact that certain people who perform certain jobs must be paid for that job. Mm-hmm. It's as simple as that. And the police are no different from anybody else. They must be paid for the job they do.
Sure. But I think you and I both remember a time, I think it was Julian Fantino who was the chief, who wanted a couple of helicopters for the police service. And they went back and forth a couple of times, you know, on whether, you know, among some people in this province, there will be a suspicion that the police want their toys, and that's what they want more money for. You know, you've heard that before.
Well, yes, indeed. But then they're the first ones to cry wolf when there isn't a helicopter there to help them.
Do you think there would be an increase in crime if the police budget were cut or frozen?
Now, that's a very difficult question to respond to answer. If it was frozen, and if you have a deterioration of policing in any community, you're going to have an after effect It's as simple as that.
We are getting emails and tweets as we're having this conversation, and here we've got one here says, I believe 89% of the police budget is salary and benefits, so maybe scheduling and planning can limit the amount of overtime. Has this person got a point?
Yes, indeed, especially when you have a homicide that occurs and you have the police officers that are attending it as quickly as possible, investigating it and so on, and you call, say, oh, stop right there. You're over your time, back to the division and get lost or what have you, and we don't have anybody else to replace you at this present moment. Who suffers? The public.
So
Who suffers?
Life doesn't work that way.
It's not work. It doesn't work that way at all. It's very hard. It's very, very difficult. It's an intangible thing until you work at it and realize how intangible it is.
So, well, I mean, you were a homicide cop once upon a time, right?
Many years, yes.
So you're telling us you can't shut the overtime spigot off because that would deter investigations?
Absolutely not. While in homicide, I've seen myself working 2 days in a row, plus, without even moving from a homicide.
StatsCan, they report that the crime severity index has decreased 22% since 1999. So again, some people will say, crime's going down, we don't need as many officers. What's the response to that?
That's very funny, really, when you look at it from the point of view of the augmentation that has occurred in relation to criminal acts that are published every day in the newspaper and what have you, and also from statistics point of view. It depends, you know, someone once said there are lies, and statistics and damn lies.
Yes.
Let me tell you that I once looked into this very carefully. And when I looked at the statistics and I spoke to the individual that was then responsible for the statistics, it was, I'll give you a quick example, okay? Your house is broken into, and...
Can't you give a different example?
Well,
make it somebody else's house.
Well, anyone's house is broken into, and substantially you're now beaten up, and your children are beaten up, and so on and so forth, etc. The individual is now under arrest for a break and enter. Now, this was the answer that I got. The charges that were laid and the charges that were recorded were one break and enter. Now, is that, and of course I jumped all over the individual at that particular point because you had, I don't know how many other charges. Now, when the statistics show that the investigation was not for one break and enter, it was for quite a lot of others.
So the stats don't tell the whole picture?
I don't believe they do, no.
Okay. Cops in Toronto make about $56,000 to $81,000, I guess. Toronto constable. How would you characterize that number?
In what way?
Is that too much, too little, just about right? How well do you think they're paid?
Well, that depends on what they're doing, and it depends on what functions they're performing, and so on. And I don't begrudge it to them at all.
I guess
cost of living is high in this city.
This is not the most dangerous city in the country, though, per capita, right?
No, but then it could be.
If not for you guys, is that what you're saying?
I'm not saying that. You are.
Okay. Okay, let's go. What do we got? A couple of minutes left here? Let's do a few more things here. The new mayor, Rob Ford, promised during the campaign to hire 100 new police officers. I don't know if he consulted the police when he made the promise, but he did make the promise. He then talked to the chief, and the chief said, I don't need 100 new officers. I need something else. How does this kind of brouhaha happen in the first place?
I don't know very much about that. I'm well aware of what you've just said, but I don't know what the ramifications are. So it's very difficult for me to answer that question. The only thing that I can say is that you look at 100 new officers over the areas that we police in metropolitan Toronto. It's a spoonful of water out of the sea.
Okay, one last question. Is it harder to be the chief of police in Toronto today or 20 years ago when you had the job?
That depends too. It's more difficult today. Yes, there's no question.
How come?
Because of the fact that the whole aspect of the political side of being the chief of police. In fact, as you probably know, and from your media background, I was not exactly the greatest media person, other than.
You weren't bad. You were good. You were fine.
Thank you. But the only thing is, you don't fight the media continuously. It's a losing battle because, as they say, they buy ink all the time and so on. Anyway, I won't get into that. I'm just saying to you that, yes, it is more difficult.
Okay. Chief McCormack, it's always good to see you.
It's my pleasure,
whether it's here at TVO or anywhere else. Thanks so much and stay well.
Pleasure indeed.